I can hear my voice.
All right, everyone, we're about to get started. Welcome to Ithaca Web People. We are hosted by Funkhaus, venue sponsor, food sponsor, and the beverages are brought to you courtesy of Vision. Thank you, Vision. Just a little bit of announcement stuff before we get to the talks. First and foremost is that we are still looking for a June presenter, right? Is that Ben had sent out the Trello board, which we're starting to try and use that a little bit more. Everybody feel free. It's on the meetup page and it's also posted in Slack and went out an email. Everyone feel free to add topics there if you have anything you want to talk about or anything you want to hear about. Those I think aren't necessarily that you just want to volunteer a topic, but also something that's worth, maybe it's something we can do around the lightning talks on, something people are just generally interested in, whatever. Still looking for, I think, June, and we have one for July, but not another one for July. So anyway, if anyone wants to volunteer to do that, put topics in there, we want to hear about everything. That is, I think, all that I have to announce. Is anyone hiring or looking for work or have any other announcements they want to say to the group before we get started?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you guys.
Looking at when the June meetup was. Yeah, Singlebrook is looking for apprentice for web and mobile development. I know we've talked to some of you guys already. And we're taking applications on our website. Come check that out. And if anyone is looking for Rails and JavaScript work, has a fair amount of experience, maybe talk to me about that too, because might need somebody else soon as well.
In addition to the apprenticeship as well? Okay, cool. So singlebrook.com, right? Looking for an apprenticeship or just, talk to Leon over here. And then also Ruby work, JavaScript work, that kind of stuff. You've got one also?
I work for a company called Ithaca, we're excited remote. We're looking for people very conservative in design, engineering, and project management. You can just go to Ithaca.com, there's a little banner. Get that and send me email as well.
Nice. Dockyard is hiring designers and engineers, you said?
Designers, engineers, front end dev.
Front end.
Doing a lot of stuff with Netflix at the moment, so that's what makes it fun. Stuff and
Awesome.
Envision.
Yes. Oh.
Sorry. Envision is always looking for back-end, Golang, front-end, React, designers, project managers, sales, marketing. I just found out today we're over 600 people, so come join the party.
Wow, nice. So Envision is hiring, Go back-end, React front-end, project management, sales, everything, all across the board. Go work for Envision. They give us beer. Yes.
Systems development. We're always looking for .NET developers. Java, if you know it.
Java and .NET, and what was the name of the?
Maybe .NET, but Java will take it too.
Got it. What was the name of the?
Performance systems development.
Performance systems development. Okay.
I forgot to clarify. So we specialize in progressive web apps. So we mainly use Ember frameworks.
Nice. Dockyard. Ember. Yes.
There was another posting, I think I have this right recently for lab ornithology for hurricane stuff.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember much about it, but we'll have to have that developer. But that was on our email list as well.
Yeah, that's right. I think that was in the Slack channel too.
I was waiting to tell us to speak that.
Yeah. Yes.
And I need to talk to someone about Android development. Just pick your brain if you have knowledge. I just have questions.
Just Android like mobile app development.
Mobile app development, specifically in the phone space, like phone dialer replacement.
Got it. Okay, cool. If anyone is good at Android development, talk to Steven.
Thank you. I'm going to sit down for most of this because I'm going to be back and forth between slides and some demos, so hope you excuse me if I need to speak up louder. I'm not a projecting voice naturally, so just let me know if I need to speak up louder. This evening's presentation is on Cesium JS, but first, a little bit about me. I'm an owner developer. I have my consulting company called Semolina LLC. My daughter in middle school named that for me, so I like it, so I kept that. I'm also a DBA developer at the Cornell Law School. I have a home with sustainable and renewable features, such as a small wind generator, geothermal, earth burn foundation, some passive solar, and other things like that. It's been on the Green Homes tour a few times in the past. I'm also a former council person in the Enfield Town Board, where I helped review the Black Oak Wind Farm application during a very contentious time. And that's an understatement, since we did have to invite the sheriff a few times to help maintain the peace. So if you've ever been to an Enfield Town Board meeting during that period, you'll understand what I mean. So. You can relate. You can relate. And if it doesn't get physical, that's good. But usually there's some cussing. Anyways, these last 2 points seem completely irrelevant to the topic, but I'm going to tie this in later, so be patient. Again, you can contact me. I have several email addresses. This is the one I use most of the time, is windymiles@gmail.com. And actually, this is a picture of my home, my property. So what is Cesium? As the opening says, it's an open source JavaScript library for world-class 3D globes and map. So what does that really mean? It's a tool that you can define globes and spheres, such as Earth. But it's not limited to that. You could create moons and like Mars and other planetary systems too, if you'd like. You can apply maps and satellite views from like Google Maps or Bing Maps or Open Maps and apply them to that sphere. You can add terrain to get a 3D effect. You can add geometry shapes and 3D models and add 3D spatial data sets. And there's a lot more you can do with it, but those are some general features. So, again, what is Cesium? It's kind of like Google Earth, but it's not. At the heart of it, it's still just a JavaScript library. It uses WebGL as the foundation for all the mapping stuff, and it ties in all the imagery layers for like the mapping and the satellite views that you need to. But in the end, it's just JavaScript underneath. And I will show you. Oh, by the way, all the pictures are that you see up here are from Cesium as well. I'll show you an example demo. This is the home page, which actually works as a live example of that. The brightness is not that great, so bear with me. Again, it's the globe, not that impressive, but you can, move around and do things with that and zoom in. Again, a lot of the stuff you've probably seen in Google Earth that you can do these things with. So you can zoom into Ithaca and stuff like that. So you can zoom in, and the way this works is that this is using Bing Maps underneath, and every time you zoom in, it adds a new tile set. So the first view, the world view, is probably only like 1 or 2 images in that tile. I'm not sure how many there are, but each time you zoom in, there's multiple levels, so every time you zoom in, it's adding a new level to that tile set. And this is Cornell. You can also get the 3D effect by doing stuff like that. And you can zoom into some of the gorges. So you can, feel free to ask questions and interrupt me if you want to. I'll have a question and answer at the end. What's that? Oh, this is, the imagery is actually from Bing Maps. And so you basically, you still have to have Bing Maps key to put into this. The examples that they have their own key, but when you develop your own application, you really have to go to Bing Maps and create an account with Bing Maps for that.
Like actual terrain geometry,
there is another service underneath that brings in the terrain, and essentially what happens is that the imagery is fairly flat. So if you don't have the terrain, everything is flat. The mountains are flat. Everything looks flat. And what happens is when you add the elevation data sets to it, it basically overlays that imagery on top of that terrain to give you that 3D effect. So without the elevation data sets that you can add, and that's something you can turn on and off in Cesium. So you can just have a completely flat Earth if you wanted to, but you can essentially turn on the elevation data sets, which makes it more interesting. And it depends on where you are in the world. Sometimes there's like the resolution of those elevation data sets aren't perfect, but they're always improving. And actually, they're coming out with a new version. I think the XX is already out, so they're replacing the current elevation data set with a new version of that. So yeah, you can just move around and do things like that. Not particularly exciting because you can do this and you probably get bored pretty quickly. It's like. But then you start thinking about the other things you can do. I'm going to go back to the slide. So one of the nice things about Cesium is that on the website they have a live coding tool. So you can actually live code in the website. I'm not going to do that because I know I'll probably blow things up if I try to start coding now. But I'll show you that. And they have beginner to advanced examples. The documentation is kind of terse. It's there and it's very detailed, but it doesn't offer a lot of great explanation. So sometimes it's great to see these examples. And you can actually play with them live. It's kind of like JS Fiddle, but for Cesium. So it's kind of exciting. I'll show you that. So again, it's like so this is a live tool, so I can actually code over here and do other stuff if I want to do that. And again, this is a live example, so you can still zoom in and zoom out on things. This one doesn't add a terrain to it, so when you do this, everything's flat. But you can add other, for example, I think it's over here. I'm going to copy out one example of that. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to delete this whole thing here. And oh, there's a slash. Yeah, see, it is live. See, I told you I'd blow it up. And again, now if I do this, there'd be more terrain data to work with. Well, but you can't really see it. I have to go in further to get. But anyways, you can live code in this, and there are lots of other examples. I'm going to go back to the gallery here. This is, when I've been working with this, these examples have been a lifesaver because there's a lot of things that it does, and it's just really, really interesting to go through and see the kinds of things it can do And if you have something in mind, it probably doesn't. There's probably an example in here that does that. And again, they have everything from beginner examples to advanced examples. Again, like with full data sets, I'll say, okay. If you're not sure how to do something, then just go to any example. Another thing that it does is you can add in 3D models. So you can see things like that. And you can actually move the 3D models around and change the location, so you can actually pretend that it's flying, even though it looks like it's staying in one place. But there are many, many examples, and I've only begun to touch the few of the features of it. I've been working with it for probably the last year or so, so it's been exciting. There are actually more demo examples of applications that have been created in it. Probably the ones you've probably heard of before is the NORAD Santa tracker. So every holiday season, you've probably heard the announcement you can track Santa, in the sled. So that was based on Cesium. But there's lots of other things like the NASA Storm Virtual Globe, and there's a Mars track and a Moon track, and New York 3D tiles. So there are, just to give you an example, lots of things, and sometimes looking through this, you say, oh, that's cool, I didn't realize it could do that, or how you could do that. So these aren't live coding examples, but they do give you a sense on how, real applications that are using Cesium. So, yeah, you can just go through, and it's pretty amazing the stuff that you can use it for. And if you don't like, for example, Bing Maps comes with Cesium by default, but you can use Google Maps if you want to. You can use OpenStreetMaps. You can use any other imagery layer that you like. And actually, you can add your own imagery layers to it if you don't like it, or if you want to add on top of that. One of the things that is nice is that you can add 3D models to it. But Cesium only uses 3D models in what's called the GLTF format. And this is sort of an emerging format supported by the Kronos group, the same industry consortium that brought you WebGL. So they're going to be fairly compatible. That's why they work so well together. And so you can include materials and textures and animations in those 3D models. However, most 3D modeling software do not natively export or work with GLTF, but there are third-party tools and plugins, which can be quirky to deal with because you have to jump through several steps to, say you're working in Maya, you have to export to one format, then you have to run it through a converter, and then if you want to make sure you keep all your shaders and animation in place, sometimes they get lost along the way. So you have to be really careful on how you manage that. And the tools and the converters are getting better. I still don't think they're perfect. You can also buy 3D models, like if you don't want to build your own. Or you can buy 3D models from places like TurboSquid, which has like a bunch of models you can buy and just download in various formats. However, most of them don't. A lot of them come with formats that you can use, but not GLTF. So you still have to, when you buy these things, you still have to run them through converter programs. And then it really depends on how the person who created and who's selling that model on like TurboSquid created that model and how they exported it. Maybe they didn't export it with animations, and you really want an animation. So that's been challenging. Like I said, I've been working with this for the last year or so, building an application called Persimia, which is a web-based simulation tool for wind turbine siting. It was developed for Persimia LLC, an Atlanta area startup founded by 2 aerospace scientists from Georgia Tech. The application is built, the technology stack is using Rails and Vue.js and Cesium as its principal technologies. And I will show you an example of that. So I'm going to go to, the idea behind this is that the commercial wind industry, engineers and other folks, planners can actually define and create wind turbine projects. In other words, they may have like a 40 turbine project or a 100 turbine project somewhere, and they want to be able to run, the idea is to be able to run simulations on what could possibly go wrong. For example, if there was like an ice throw or blade throw, if you want to know what the impact of flicker and the view shed is, this is why this tool was designed. And here's an example. So you can still start to see the it's still kind of like the 3D effect. And so you can, this is a project that has, looks like 5 or 6 turbines. So it's a fairly small project. And this is just a made up project. This isn't real, so. And the idea is that you want to define your wind farm, and you want to know what the impact is on schools, buildings, houses, roads. And so the industry typically calls those like receptors. So you can define receptor points, and then you can navigate to them. And this uses features of Cesium. Actually, what you're looking at now uses several features of Cesium. First of all, it's the mapping layer from Bing Maps underneath. And it's adding geometry to that, which is basically just polygon geometry that it adds to that. And you can also add 3D objects. For example, this is a turbine that's, again, in GLTF format that includes animation. As you notice, there are some shadows you can add to that. So those are lighting features, which you can turn on and off and configure. So it understands the time of day, which is nice. Because if a few hours later, there won't be any shadows because it'll be evening time. The whole idea of this is to run simulations. I've already run them. Actually, the simulations could take several minutes to run, so I'm not going to bore you with running a simulation. But there are some simulations that have already been run. And this is, for example, a blade throw impact. These are the potential impact points if there is a blade throw. There's an ice throw that is very similar. And again, the red is bad. Blue is good. You don't want to be in that area. So this helps you. If you want more detail, you can always look at tabular data as well and see what are the probabilities of an impact of a particular turbine on particular receptor points. And there are several other ones, like there's flicker. So as you can see, this is as the sun comes up and sets, you can see that, so the red is always going to tend to be in the north here. And also there's a view shed too, to see how many turbines are visible from particular points. And also there's noise simulations as well. Some of the, again, it has contour points. This is in DBA. which is helpful. I know a lot of the industry, a lot of the controversies for noise is in the infrasound, so this doesn't do that yet. So hopefully that will be something in the future that it could potentially do. But it will show you the sound in dBA potential. This also shows you several other things. For example, there are, I said that you can add like tile sets. Like there is the map tile set, or the satellite imagery tile set, which you see. On top of that is this heat map. So basically, that's another imagery layer you add. So I could probably fill the entire globe with my own tile sets if I had such things. But or you can just apply them to a very specific area. And on top of that is a contour. So this is actually the heat map and the contours are separate images that are laid on top of each other. And each layer, you can add an alpha transparency, so you can kind of play with that, with the alphas, to see how that works. And you can turn on and off things. You turn on and off turbines and show contour lines. And so you can turn on and off those layers. So you really have to have, one thing you probably noticed if you're going to use Cesium for such an application, that you really have to keep track of all the things that you add to the map. You can, there are collections of objects and entities and you have to really keep track of that. Which is one of the reasons why I use a view model. For example, I use Vue.js since it was perfect. I could have chosen from like probably React or Angular, but Vue.js was just perfect for this. So it maintains a view state in the front end. So one thing you notice that it's not doing refreshes, so it's always pulling data. One thing Cesium also has, you can fly to things. So it can be really quick, or it can be really slow. If I go off here somewhere, it could take its time. So you can configure that. These are things that you can configure with Cesium. I'll show you another project. I added turbines around my home. See what would happen. And actually, that's a place where actually there really is a small wind turbine. You can add new turbines just by clicking on the new turbine button and placing another turbine there, and it just drops it in place. To add receptor points or receptors, you can. It's basically just creates a geometry, so you can just start clicking on points. It's kind of hard to show on the red on this field, and then it just does that, and it adds a new receptor point. So these are some of the things that you can do with Cesium. Let me see. One other feature that's nice, since it's using WebGL underneath, you can grab the context of the WebGL thing, and there's I forget the name of the function. I think it's like toData URL to capture the screen, and that's essentially what this new image thing does. So you can just capture the screen and start downloading images, and it saves them there as well. So some of that would be almost nearly impossible if you didn't have like a Vue front end like Vue.js. You could see how that would be really difficult because you don't want to keep refreshing the screen and keep going back and forth doing full refreshes. So you really need to have something like Vue.js or some front end view state model to help you do that.
Michael, how much of that is native out of Cesium versus something you guys have built on top of Cesium?
Most of those features are native to Cesium. The difficulty was probably in figuring out how to do some of the things that was difficult. This.
Run simulations, like it does all
Actually, I should clarify that this actually runs some proprietary simulations that the scientist I work with came up with. And when it runs simulations, we were concerned that it could take several minutes to run. And that would be really an awful experience in a web. So when you run a new simulation, and I can show you an example of how you would set something off. You could run a new simulation, and it gives you, I'll start with configuration. Oh, you have multiple configurations, so you can have like configuration. This is project with configuration A, B, or C, so you can put them in different places. But anyway, so you can pick a configuration and a simulation that you want to run. And I'll say blade throw. Actually, there's other ones like noise that give you more options to add. And so what happens is that this is where it gets this is a lot of stuff that we built on top of Cesium that it doesn't do. That in order to run simulations, you have to define like a grid that is your project area. And so what it does is it lays out like I think 100 by 100 or 1,000. I think it's like 10,000 points that it lays out as a grid. And I have to get the elevations for each of those points in that grid. And that project grid area is created. And that's what it, actually, look, that's already started running. But that's what it's doing. And it also creates a collection of all the turbines and receptor points and sends them up as like a JSON package. And there's some back and forth on how it does this. Part of Cesium is you have to get the elevation. You can get that. When I first started doing this, I was only placing a turbine on the map, and you have to get the elevation. So because it could be like halfway underground. So you really have to know the elevation of where you're placing something. So you can get elevation for one point, or you can send it a collection of coordinates and get the entire set back with elevation data. So it's taken advantage of some Cesium features that it does.
So you basically, like, when you run that generate function, you're basically gathering a bunch of data. You make a grid and then gather all the points.
Yes.
And Cesium is giving you all of that. And then presumably you send that to a server to actually do the calculation?
Yes, we have a separate compute server. Actually, we created our own compute service engine, which is actually running on a separate server. And so, but we package up the stuff and we have it available so the compute service can pick it up and then run the simulations and then put the results back. That's an oversimplification of what it's doing. If you saw the workflow on this, it's like arrows all over the place and lots of stuff going on. But in the end, it's just like packaging up some input data that the simulations need to run. The compute service, which is sitting on a separate server, picks that up, runs it, and brings results back. Some of the results back are some of those like images you saw. We had to adjust how we did things, and this is another thing you learn with Cesium over when you start working with it. Initially, when you saw the impact points with the blade throw and the ice throw, we tried. Well, I've always been working with like a few turbines. Well, we tried a project with like 30 or 40 turbines and had like thousands of impact points. And the way I was initially creating them was creating the geometry. So I was creating actually circles and placing them on the map. And eventually that just blew things up. So it had troubles with placing thousands of things on the map, which I think it could do, so there might be some other reason for that. So in the end, we had to change, and since we can add imagery layers too, what we did is that we created an image of the impact points and then use that as an imagery layer. So it's kind of cheating, but it works. And sometimes you have to make adjustments based on the performance and how that works. And here's the noise simulation, and that's with the new turbine I just put in there. It didn't take too long. And you can do that. I have a dev server. I can show you an example. I won't want to take is what happens if you place 200 plus turbines on a map. So we tried to do some stress test on this. And so I picked Mittenwald, Germany. Initially, I had like 2 or 3 over here, and there's some in the mountains. And then I placed 200 turbines, all spinning, all 3D objects, you know, on this. Yeah, part of this is my computer rendering. It's on a laptop, but it works. Which is surprisingly. So we do fun stuff like that, see what would happen. Because in a typical project, some of the commercial wind installers, they're working on, 100, 200, plus turbine installations. And so that's that. Some caveats is, I talked about elevations before. The elevations are in WGS 84, which when I started working with this a little over a year ago, I'm like, I'm thinking elevations. Like you look at the topo maps, everything's in something above sea level. In this world, there is a standard called WGS. I can't remember what that stands for. It's World Geodetic System, 1984 standard, and basically it's a standardized model of the Earth's shape, which is not completely round. So they've already done the work on mapping out, the shape of the Earth and the surface of the Earth. And so when you get the elevation, you're always working with elevations in this standard. You're not working with elevations above sea level because sea level can change depending on what sea level is at any given time. So this is a standardized way of getting elevation. So all the elevations are always in this standard. This, for the app that I created, I've had it work on my tablet, but the mobile experience hasn't been consistent. And at some point I get it, and then it blows up with a WebGL error. So your mobile experience can vary depending on what you're doing. Again, I mentioned before, creating and converting 3D models to GLTF can be challenging because you have to go through several steps, and that's the only standard that it creates. And like in GLTF, it's just JSON format, but it has to get to that format with the right animations and shaders and stuff like that. Again, it's just a JavaScript library, open source JavaScript library that helps bring together all these nice features and tools, but you still have to do the work on getting the Bing license, and Bing accounts set up, Google licensing if you use Google. We use Bing for this because it seemed a little bit better for pricing. But the visuals, if you compare like Bing Maps with Google Maps next to each other, I'm not sure if you've ever done this, Google Maps is clearly better in terms of the imagery. I talked with the Bing Maps folks, I think last fall. Initially, the problem was that their imagery layers were like, not just out of date, they were like years out of date. They were like 7 or 8 years out of date. And I'm like, well, that's not really helpful. Because sometimes if you're using it to place impact, to place receptor points, it'd be nice to know if there's like a new thing there. But you still have to manage the licensing, and that also includes the terrain service too. And there's the terrain tile set that is using right now is being replaced. So this is, we're in that window of opportunity where we're supposed to be replacing and getting the licensing for that terrain, that elevation data set, which you would need as well too. Some final thoughts. Try it out. It's pretty cool. That's actually a picture of Milford Sound on there. So it's fun to fly all over the world and see cool stuff, and you can, fly. It's pretty amazing. There's a lot of features to it, many that I haven't used yet, and there are features I keep thinking, oh, it'd be really cool if we could do this or we could do that. Like if you have a drone and you want to 3D map like a building or a property or something, you could do that and add that to Cesium as well. And there are examples that in the demos that show you adding some of that data to Cesium. So keep in mind for your next project and have fun. And I think that was it. And I probably left out a bunch of stuff, but any questions?
How was it working with like Cesium, I guess, in combination with like reactivity library? Because I imagine there's a lot of things you're saying that you're sort of maintaining the state of the map in the view state, but then that has to turn into commands in Cesium, right? Does it deal well with that, or is it difficult to marry those things together?
It's good to have a good handle on the things you want to have on the map. And in other words, I use Vue.js, and in the view model, I have a collection of turbines, I have a collection of receptor points, and I have other data relating to that project. I also have a collection of configurations, so you can change configurations. One of the things is you notice that you can just flip configurations on and off and change the simulations on and off, and what it's doing is it's replacing all those things and adding, like if you did a simulation like 2 weeks ago, your simulation could be different. So it's showing the simulation with the turbines and the receptor points at the time that you did the simulation. So you have to maintain that state. So each simulation, each configuration will have its own collection of objects that you have to maintain. And then you have to switch them on and off and add them. And it would be, I'm not even sure how I would do it without something like Vue.js or other front-end model, because you really need to maintain that state, and you can't keep going back and refreshing the entire page. Initially, my first version when I was testing this did that, and it was very, very annoying. So this way, it can just use Vue.js and do the AJAX calls asynchronously out, and just replace. And you just basically have to replace those front-end data, the client data model, and I have functions that deal with the Cesium part of that replaces that on the map too. So, so you do have to do that. So it's good to, if you're doing this, it's good to make sure you have a good understanding and a good handle on what you're trying to do. So, yes. A what?
Black Oaks model. We built the wind turbine farm.
Oh, I put turbines in that area, but I've stayed away from that. I've actually have not. Actually, I do know I have the information, but I do know where those turbines are, and they went through multiple configurations too, which was one of the reasons why we have multiple configurations, because these projects can change or they can run through different scenarios. But no, I did not try the Black Oak or any configuration of it. I don't want to open up that. So someone may it's like, well, it's like this is still fairly new, and we're just trying to get this out the door now, and we've had some pretty good feedback and reception, in the commercial wind industry. So it's been exciting, but it's my clients that are doing the marketing on that. So I'm just, I keep the technology. I'll let them do the marketing on that. But yeah, someday I may actually put the Black Oak configuration in there and see what happens. What's that? Oh, Black Oak was the proposed wind farm that was proposed proposed to go out in Enfield, New York, which is a town on the sort of the western side of the county, and it actually has the highest point in the county. So it was a really good location for something like that. except one of the issues that came up was siting, and there was a lot of passion on both sides, for and against, but finding solid science data to support things was challenging. But there was people were very passionate about things, so that's why some of the meetings, as you can guess, got pretty heated. And it would have been great to have a tool like this that some of the engineering firms that we're working with could have used. Say, this is what it really meant. But also out in in the Black Oak area, there's a lot of wind farms going out in Iowa. But if you've ever been out in Iowa, there's like miles of nothing, just flat farmland, and so it's perfect for some of these large wind farm projects, and it's great. But even in Tompkins County, there's really no place that's rural. It's rural, but you still have a lot of homes and a lot of families living up in that area, so you're never going to find the perfect place to put a wind project that's not going to be impacting someone. But yeah, I pretty much stayed away from that. Yes?
You mentioned the terrain or elevation is separate from the actual map.
Actually, Cesium gives you an example. Actually, it's really built into Cesium, but it is a separate service that it calls out to get.
Yeah, I was wondering who distributed that.
I have a feeling that we're going to be paying for that. So if you use it for a commercial product, then I think there are some payment options in there. So my clients know about it. I let them know. In fact, I think even on the website, it gives you notice down below about the deprecation of it. So, but the good thing is they put various elevation data sets together. You can imagine, like, there's a national elevation data set. That's great if you're in the U.S., but if you're in New Zealand, what do you do? So you got to cover the whole world, and this service that it uses covers the entire world. Not always to the same resolution, but it's pretty good. It's pretty decent. So, and they've done the work on putting that together, so you don't have to do that work.
It looked like in the examples you were going through, there was like terrain, there was like a Mars terrain map and stuff. Is it like?
Yes.
Is this, like only to Earth, or like
no,
you can presumably make globe models that are like?
No, you can.
Planet, right?
No, yes, you can. You can do. Let me see. Close the demo. I'll show you. I think there's a demo of Mars.
Oh yeah.
There's a Mars track. See, how do I start that thing? Somewhere, there must be a link to start this thing. Oh, there it is. Takes a while. But basically what they've done to Earth, they've done to Mars as well. Maybe not to the same exacting resolution, but it's pretty cool. As you can see, it takes a little bit of while. Skip the tutorial. That's flat, but I think I can, yeah. Well, that's probably what the image looks like, but we'll do the 3D globe version of that. And again, you can still navigate around Mars, which is pretty cool. I think they have a moon version of it too, and you can kind of zoom in. And there's all sorts of other features to this that show like past trips and that like the rovers have taken, and give you examples of that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, you can do. It doesn't have to be just Earth. So there are people that have worked on this. NASA, I guess mainly, but.
What are your demos showing, like internet traffic or something, some live data?
I don't know. That's a good example. I haven't come across one because a lot of this is just preset satellite imagery. I haven't noticed any. There may be some in some of the examples. I just haven't seen that. But that would be pretty Well, that'd be kind of creepy, but cool at the same time to see actually live cams and stuff like that that apply to that. And again, it'd be pretty cool to map like 3D your buildings. Like if you want to have a drone and scan your property or scan your buildings, you could do stuff like that and apply it to add that as, because most of the time, the imagery is flat. It doesn't know, unless there's an elevation data set, it doesn't know that there's a building there. So the buildings are always going to look flat too. People have mapped out New York City and other cities to do this, which is cool. But in most places you go to, you're not going to get anything like 3D buildings. So someone has to do the work on providing that data. So, anything else? Okay. Thank you.
All right, I think we're going to take a quick 10 minutes probably, and then we'll do the next talk.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, is this for the live stream? Gotcha. Okay, hopefully I'm not screechingly loud to... Blank screen. Mystery. How are your kids and how's your wife doing? What's your wife's name again?
Amber.
Amber.
Yeah.
Nice. She's doing good. Everyone's good.
Our oldest just turned 6. So she
Whoa. That's like an adult at that point. So off to school, like, right? Like, are you still biking? Are you still biking in from your? Well, I guess it's been kind of cold, but
yeah, not so
just
much,
recently it
not
got.
so much through the winter. But
Nah.
yeah, now that it's been getting warmer, it's been nice.
Yeah.
This might not work for me, actually. But
Oh
that's
no?
okay. No, I just don't have Keynote on here.
Oh here, I'll export it as a PDF real fast.
Oh, can you do that?
Yeah. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, no, thank you.
Image quality, best, next. Division tag. All right, come.
1 second to like
Yeah, whatever.
figure it out here and then.
There's an intentional blank screen to begin.
Okay.
Because I don't like when there's like, I'm not ready to like start yet, you know, I don't want people to be reading ahead. You know, you gotta wait a little. Where are you live streaming? Just on, you're just,
YouTube.
it's YouTube?
Yeah.
Cool.
We always get a good handful of people that tune in. I think people that just can't make it or don't feel like coming to
Yeah.
the actual, you know.
Yeah, today's a hard day because it's so nice out. But I was like, in my head, I was like, there's gonna be 3 people. One of them's gonna be my husband. But I was actually really happy about the turnout.
It's not a bad turnout.
I was like, not too bad. I mean, developers though, you know.
Yeah, it's tough.
You know.
You gotta make the
If you have the pizza and the beer, they will come.
Right, that's the trick. Yeah.
Totally. So yeah, I'm ready whenever you are. Like, go, beer, it's the best. Oh yeah, that's actually surprising for an IPA, I guess. You're right. That's so smart. I knew you were my friend for a reason. I knew we were friends. Oh, what'd you get? Yeah. Is this all for you? What is that?
No, it's just like,
What is this?
the grape leaves. I'm gonna sit in your seat.
Yeah, do. Just move my stuff. Thank you. Lord knows I needed. Oh my God, that's amazing. I don't know. Oh, baby. Okay, baby.
We'll be looking a little closer.
Okay. Babe, you want some? Well, we've got some connections in the other room. There's like another event happening, but Tal, who like catered our wedding, is here. Does she want to come in? Is she over there? Is Tal over there? Hey, lady. You want to come in and listen? You gotta. Okay. Maybe.
Those aren't too heavy. You already got like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah. Baba Ganoush. Do a little this, do a little that. Oh yeah, this looks good.
About to get started with our second talk.
I have stuff in my face. Okay.
Okay, please welcome Jess.
I gotta stand like over here. Hey everybody, I'm Jess Rogan, and I'm here to give the design portion of this evening's talk. And just wanted to let you know I did do some running through this talk this afternoon with a small audience. My dog. You can see it went pretty well. He was really excited to listen to me go over this over and over again. But I'm here to talk about building your skill set to be one badass Quiver. So, as I said, I'm Jess Rogan. I've been a designer for the last 10 years and taught a few web design courses in that time. Worked for a bunch of different ad agencies, design agencies, and also worked for a software startup, which is what actually brought me here to Ithaca. 2 years ago, left the software startup. Some of you might know, I should just mention what the software startup was because I'm probably going to talk about it in the talk, but it was GiveGab. And 2 years ago, left to start my own design business, and then just recently kind of joined forces with one of my good friends to create a branding design business called Water and Sky. So that's me in a nutshell, and I'm super happy to be here and thankful for IWP for asking me to talk today to you. And also, thanks to Funkhaus for hosting. It's such an awesome space. Originally, my talk was titled Building Your Design Quiver, but knowing this was also, there are a lot of developers here, I wanted to kind of broaden it. And really, as I started to put it together, I started to notice that a lot of the things I was talking about could really be applied to anybody. So hence why building your skill set to be one badass Quiver. So also, total disclaimer, I've never shot a bow and arrow in my entire life. Like, I don't even think I've held one. Like, maybe I've held an arrow, but growing up, and I think this crowd, maybe I don't have to explain, but I was big into Lord of the Rings and very big into Legolas. Let's just, as a teen. And so as teenagers do, especially a young teenage girl, I went and bought a cardboard cutout, life-size Legolas, and he was in my room. And my mom did not like this because every time she'd go in to put my laundry on the bed, out of her periph, she would see, it's a life-size cardboard cutout. It was terrifying. So she, after a while, she's like, Jessica, this is just the garbage, So I just had to get rid of it, throw it away. But really, it doesn't stop me from, pretending to, be Legolas one day. This is actually Stephen Colbert. So why? Why is building our skill set so important, right? I don't know if we've thought about this, but it's obvious that we all continually want to improve, right? With this idea of continuous improvement, right? Especially as lives go on, technology keeps improving. We want to keep up with that technology. And we're just aiming to be better than before. And really, I thought about this, and if we weren't doing that, if we weren't continuously improving, I'd still be in my college apartment eating Doritos and making Flash websites. And I've got quite the surprise for you because I found my first website, and I am going to show it to you right now. So prepare to be amazed. Here it is, the completely responsive, not at all responsive. I mean, maybe at first glance you're like, oh, cool, but then you're like, what in the heck is going on? I mean, this was an arts magazine in Scranton. I had a friend who wanted to put out a magazine that was about sort of the underground arts culture and whatnot in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I was like, yeah, I could build your website in Flash. And he's like, yeah. So, at such features as, this is super important for usability, page turn. This is so ridiculous. Flash doesn't even exist. Adobe Flash doesn't even exist. So, also, this is a nice Easter egg. Blog. You have to hover over the pen. I just assumed people would know that. Like, you know, some of these links are just kind of ridiculous. Like you have to hit this triangle. Because you don't want to use the browser window scrolling. You just want to use this one. So anyways, that is my humble beginnings. And really, we continually build our skill set because obviously we want to, you know, improve ourselves. But there are some other reasons why, right? You know, we want to stand out and differentiate ourselves, right? If I was still building Flash websites, I don't know how desirable I would have been in the workforce. But I, in college, decided to work for an interactive agency, an intern there, and so that kind of got me out of my Flash phase and into my WordPress phase. And so I learned how to build websites using WordPress as a CMS. And so that's kind of how I grew that aspect of my skill set. And then in turn, you know, right out of college, I was hired. I didn't have any trouble finding a job because that was something that skill helped me stand out. The second is we want to make our lives easier. I don't know if anyone else has an issue with this. Like a recent example of this from my life is the skill of saying no. I'm an extreme yes person to everything. It's very hard for me to like say no because I don't want to disappoint anybody and, you know, yeah, yes, of course, I can help you, yes, yes, yes. But really I started to see that I was super overwhelmed. I didn't have time to do the things I wanted to do. And so this skill of saying no was something that really make my life easier. And lastly, I think we want, and there's plenty of things, there are plenty of reasons why, these are just the three I thought of, but we want to be well-rounded because after all, you know, adding more skills to our skill set are going to make us more well-rounded and strengthen ourselves as designers and developers, right? This is a nice Japanese proverb I found on Google. So how do we build upon our skill set, right? I don't know that I've actually really thought about it till I was putting this presentation together, but then it started to all make sense to me. And really, I found that we build our skills in two ways. We build them inadvertently, and we build them intentionally. And I think these things can work interchangeably. I don't think it's one way or the other. Sometimes these things feed into each other. So let's talk about inadvertently building skills. I think sometimes these are the skills we don't really realize we're building. You know, I call them the silent but deadly skills. They're not deadly, but they're the skills that we're building inadvertently because, you know, and they might be things that we don't necessarily think of or we're doing them for our job. And we really didn't plan on learning them from the get-go. So, and it's not bad. Learning skills this way isn't a bad thing. For example, when I worked at GiveGab, I was the first designer and the only designer for about a year, and then our team just had to grow. And so more designers and front-end developers came along, and I was all of a sudden found in this role where I was managing a team. And I wouldn't have had that experience of managing a team and learning how to deal with different personalities, learning how to take on different initiatives and doing those types of things had I not been forced, you know, into doing it, right? So inadvertently, and like, you know, you can do fun things like make temporary tattoos and whatnot. So, and that was super fun. So I really enjoyed that experience of managing a team, and I wouldn't have had that. So then there's the things that we want to build intentionally. These are the skills that make us really excited, but they're the things that we have to make an effort and make a time to build. And so sometimes, you know, well, this is a good time to interject that I messed up. I did. I think that sometimes the idea of intentional skills, these get kind of pushed to the wayside because we're busy, we make up excuses or whatnot. But I think that these types of skills are extremely important. And for me, a good example is when I was working at GiveGab, and even when I was working at design agencies, I was always freelancing and doing a side project, always. Like, not for the money, just because I, once again, couldn't say no. So I was like building websites on the side, doing things on the side, all these things on the side. But what I really, truly wanted to be doing was illustrating and hand lettering and crafting and doing stuff like that. But I wasn't giving myself permission to play. So I really would encourage you to do what you want to do because, you know, that permission to play is super important. And the things that hold us back, I think the most common things are we don't have enough time, right? Or we're not using our time wisely, like I was, not using my time wisely when I had the time. And I think many of us also just, maybe we don't know what that next skill is or the next thing is that we want to focus on. We're kind of unsure, and I'll touch about that later. And then the third point is kind of interesting because there's this fear, I think, of being a beginner at something. Like, think about it. When's the last time you were like a true beginner at something? Like CesiumJS, like you probably, like at some point, you kind of, you've learned other JS, right? Like, so it's like, oh, CesiumJS, right? But the fear of being a beginner is super scary, and I kind of want to touch upon this because obviously we're all beginners at some point, and it was a lot easier when we were in school and we were around other beginners that were all doing the same thing, we're all learning together. It's like, oh, okay, great. But when we're past school and we're adults, you know, you kind of get a little bit scared. And I think the important thing about being a beginner is it not only keeps us on our toes, right, but it kind of keeps our egos in check. And a good example for me is 5 years ago, I decided to try mountain biking. My husband, then boyfriend, he's here, he's super talented at mountain biking, and I saw it as a way we could spend more time together. I was like, oh, I want to do mountain biking. Like, yeah, I rode a bike as a kid. Like, I could totally get into mountain biking. And, you know, I saw him doing it. Like, I saw photos and videos of him going on these rides, and he's so good. He's, like, jumping off of things, and I was like, that looks like fun. So I really wanted to do it, and not really thinking, okay, this is going to take some major practice. And so the first ride I ever went on with Jay, he was like, okay, well, you know, we're going to borrow a bike for you. The bike was like 2 sizes too big, and I was going down, I wasn't even on the trail. I was on like an ATV path that was like covered in rocks, and I just got really scared as I was like going down this giant hill, and I grabbed like a fistful of front brake and just flew over the handlebars. And that's not this particular fall. This is another fall. But I was like, I need a blood photo to look like legit. But I was definitely hurting after that fall. And so I had plenty of excuses to stop trying, right? I certainly felt like the noob. You know, I felt like this newbie that didn't know what I was doing. I was slow. I couldn't keep up with the group. I couldn't keep up with Jay. I was like, man, this is terrible. Who wants to do this? But after a while, I started to realize, like, I craved that challenge, and something about it made me really furious and like determined to be better at it. And when it was the moment when I stopped comparing myself to other people and just focused on my progress that I was able to get past that. And so this is us on like the day before our wedding day. We had like a pre-wedding ride with some friends, and now we're both certified to coach mountain biking. So that's that. Okay, so what? Maybe you're not really sure what skills you want to work on or add to your quiver, whatnot. And so this is where I think it's really important to ask questions. What's important to me? Why is it important to me? Like what makes you look at something and you're like, wow, I want to do that. I want to build that, right? Like what are those things that would be a good addition to your quiver? And I read this article, I don't know, maybe some of you are familiar with Mark Manson, who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. But he also wrote this article called 7 Strange Questions to Help You Figure Out Your Life Purpose. And there was this one that was, this one question, which was, what is true about you today that would make your 8-year-old self cry? And I thought about this and I was like, man, drawing. Like drawing for me was something that like if I told 8-year-old me, like, yeah, I don't draw anymore, like I'd probably cry. And so at that point, well, let me back up, because for me, growing up an only child, you have to entertain yourself a little bit. Like no one's gonna entertain you. My parents really didn't entertain me, so I found a lot of other ways to entertain myself, drawing being one of them. And I would draw many, many things, many magical places, mostly deer because I grew up in the woods. I drew a lot of deer. And so I started to have this feeling like I need to get back into drawing. I need to illustrate. And so I did that, and I set the intention to do more illustration. Actually, that's why I bought this iPad. So, but look, I'm using it for something else. I hope you guys aren't like, maybe you need to add public speaking to your skill set. Like at the end, that's it. There's a deer. Okay. So I just wanted to show you, like, this is my Quiver as it stands, and I've not really done this. I've not really done this, like, putting things in a bucket until last fall when I took a trip to Ecuador with one of my friends who's a stream ecologist. And it was not for design, it was not for anything that I'm related to whatsoever. It was just a travel trip. She was like, you know, every year I go do my field work, I have a terrible field assistant, but I feel like you'd be a really good field assistant. Everything is paid for. I just need you to, like, have the time. And I was like, yeah, I have the time, I'm there. And so she's like, I just need you to make a resume. And I was like, I haven't made a resume since college. Like, I don't even know. So, like, putting all this stuff together is kind of, like, fascinating. So if you haven't done, like, a list for yourself, it's just amazing just to see the things that you are, feel like you're really good at. And so the things on the top, sorry, I went off on a tangent. The things on the top, these are the things for me that feel really stable, that I feel really confident in, and always work in progress, right? We're always working on this stuff. And then the things at the bottom are like, I'm working on it, right? Saying no, managing time. A lot of these things are things I need to be intentional about. A lot of these things are just happening inadvertently, right? With my business partner and I in our business, managing clients. Like every time we have a meeting, we come back from the meeting, we're like, what did we learn from that? Well, how can we make our process better? And so this is currently my Quiver. But to be honest with you all, in the last 10 years, I think the biggest thing for me was that I realize now is that I don't, like my focus, like what was my focus when I was doing all this, when I was building all of this? And sometimes you start to get a little lost, like what is it that I was trying to do? Why was I trying to build this Quiver in the first place? It's like walking around, like I'm Legolas, but I'm not in Lord of the Rings, I'm like somewhere else. I'm just lost, I have no purpose, no mission, no world to save, no Middle Earth. So I think the important thing is to understand why you do what you do, and that for me, kind of coming to this realization now, like literally in the last month, this has been like a huge, but it's been sort of a catalyst, something that's been happening and working up to this point of really trying to hone back in of why I do what I do. And that really comes down to asking yourself those kinds of questions. And so recently, my husband and I sold our house, so we're leaving Ithaca on Saturday. But this is good. If the talk doesn't go well and you guys are like, oh, this is the worst, like we're leaving, so. So you can't find me. We've decided to sell our home and move into our Airstream full time and travel on the road. We both have jobs, and I would assume a lot of you have jobs or like skills that could allow you to travel on the road, but that's something we're very intentional about building skill set that allow us to be anywhere at any time, work from anywhere at any time. And so that's been super important for us and as we make this transition. So anyways, I will leave you with this quote from George Lucas. You have to find something that you love enough to be able to take risks, jump over hurdles, and break through brick walls that are going to be placed in front of you. Because if you don't have that kind of feeling for what it is you're doing, you'll stop at the first giant hurdle. That's it. Any questions? Sorry if I talk too fast. Questions.
Not really a question, but in case I forget, we should do a round of lightning talks with everybody's first website.
Yes. First websites.
I have a related question.
Yes.
Do you actually get Flash running in Chrome somehow?
So I had I don't know what happened. I was like, oh, it works. I'm not going to mess with it. I was actually refusing to update Chrome for a couple days because I was like, it works now. I have to preserve this browser window for the talk. So yeah, somehow it worked. But yeah, thanks for having me. If you have any questions, you can email me, find me. That's our home soon. So awesome. Thanks, guys.
Okay, that's it.
Oh, yeah, that's it.